plots are sort of removed from history. It's the legs that they wanted, that the British officials wanted them eliminated so completely that they didn't appear in. And of course, the monkeys were complicit in helping that instance too. And then perhaps the most famous, when you say drawn and quartered, my mind immediately goes to Metacom of King Philip. Right? He was the great Wampanoag king who went to war on the frontier in 1676, attacked 90 towns with roughly 15,000 Native Americans, 12 of those towns completely destroyed, and they couldn't catch them. They really could not. They had a real problem. The Uncas tribal leader, Uncas, the tribal leader who was Mohican, was one of the primary sort of helpers in tracking down Metacom and his allies, and of course, eventually he brought to their tribe. The Catawba, a South Carolina Native American group, appeared really early in South Carolina documentation as hunting for the officials capturing Africans that have escaped in the frontier. So they become sort of slave capturers in that region. And then they actually become slave owners, right? So in the 18th century, the Catawba, who are going to shrink in numbers because of smallpox, frankly, alcohol, and that's usually by the authorities, will be slave owners for some time, but they started as slave capturers. But in my mind, all of these groups sort of witnessed the colonial chaos that was French, Dutch, British overlap in that time period. Found the best way they could to persevere and survive, and persist, regardless of how you sort of judge the rationale. So I was going to talk a little bit about politics of opportunity. So towards the end, I want to again discuss more this diaspora of the four civilized tribes. Mainly, Seminoles really aren't going to go until later, not great numbers. But also all those black folks that went with them. One of the individuals who really was able to parlay, government subsidies, sort of intermarriage, slave ownership, was a gentleman named Robert Jones, Colonel Robert Jones. He was a Choctaw who becomes this land matron and one of the richest cotton growers in the Southwest for some time. His exact DNA lineage is debatable, but he certainly identifies as Choctaw and has found a way through the sort of the systems of the times to become a prestigious, wealthy, powerful landowner in the Southwest. Allowing Muhammad, I'm sure said this familiar. So a Sea Island imam who, like a number, so roughly 10% of the 400,000 Africans who come into North America will be Muslims, most likely, yes. So, and you have disproportionate numbers in certain places. Certainly, in the Sea Islands, you see numbers of Muslims there. Elijah Muhammad is able to, through his acumen, his organization, etc., sort of rise through the ranks of slavery and has quite a few followers as an imam, but certainly as an overseer within the region too. Has a large family, sort of a prosperous repository of historical information at this point. And this kind of came up with the 1619 date that Stephen was talking about, so I'm sure you're all familiar with Anthony Johnson, or Anthony Benedict, as John Galt was in 1619, he purchased one of his first 20 brothers that comes from Jamestown. And of course, that charter generation are, in ways, as much potential indentures as they are slaves. Anthony Johnson becomes the most famous. He's going to eventually earn his own freedom, negotiate his own freedom, and then buys a massive portion of land in Virginia. Takes his name, which gives us some sort of understanding idea. New York State's my state. So I like to dig into the origins of New Amsterdam, upstate, et cetera, et cetera. So I took some time and I was really looking at Black culture in early New Amsterdam to the best of my ability. So the West India Company, the WIC, if you will, of the Dutch, are the corporate entity responsible for trying to bring slaves into New Amsterdam in order to provide the labor force necessary to build the greatest city in the world. Yeah? The way it's done is kind of arbitrary. And there aren't that many blacks that end up coming into New Amsterdam. Those who do find an obvious modicum of success, their own sort of place, but it had to be this really dizzying diasporic experience because of where they came from, the channels they came through, and sort of the colonial overlap of their entrance into the colony, right? So when you look at roughly 1612, right up through 1644, when they surrendered the colony, you find Africans that are coming from different places. Now, some of them make sense. When the Dutch take Brazil from the Portuguese for roughly 40 years, you start to see Africans directly from Brazil, which were most likely probably from Rwanda or Angolans, coming circa Portuguese through Dutch capture to New Netherlands, right? So you have this intersection of sort of Congolese, Portuguese, Dutch, and then New Netherlands culture that these black folks are moving into. After a while, Morocco becomes sort of the island of choice that you start to see Dutch bringing blacks into New Amsterdam. And then there's an alarming number of Africans that are captured by Dutch privateers that are brought in, right? And the notations will just say, a Dutch privateer delivers 5 Africans into New Amsterdam. They come in these small sort of pockets of numbers into New Amsterdam at the time. Only 2 large shiploads of Africans come into New Amsterdam. And that's towards the end of Dutch rule before the English take over. When I say large, the second one's about 220, 230, quite a large ship. And the first one's about half that number, and allegedly they're from the Light of Guinea, right? So you definitely have this conglomerate African culture in early New Netherlands. And I always play with it because I'm from New York, and it's cold. It's really cold, and I'm always fascinated with the sort of the diaspora of plants and seeds and diet food, right? So it's a lot easier theoretically if you're moving into the Gulf or into the Sea Islands to maybe transport some seeds, some plants, acquire them through different connections you might have. But what do you grow if you're, Central African through Brazil into New York? It has any sort of, reminiscence with your past. That's such an integral part of identity for me, and I think for many people. I actually read this really sort of exhausting journal article on Dutch food in the New Netherlands yesterday, and they ate really well, right? So they had these really great trade relationships with the Germans in the area, so they always had fresh duck, deer, turkey, etc. Because the West India Company was so connected throughout the empire, they were importing all kinds of, really sort of exotic foods into New Netherlands. You get some mentioning of Native American contributions. Corn becomes very popular, squash becomes very popular. What was so conspicuous to me was the absence of any sort of African traditional food. But then all of this really elaborate discussion and description of markets of food, etc. So that piece for me was sort of head scratching, and so I was trying to time travel, and think of 1625, I recently arrived there, trying to work through this whole thing, the environment's different than it is. What do I eat? And how does that remind me and give me some comfort and peace in the midst of that sort of tragedy and struggle? And I think I'll transition quickly to the movement of the four tribes, the Choctaw, the Chickasaw, the Cherokee, and the Creek, into the West. Now, my father's from Georgia. He's from Douglas County. My mom's from Northern PA. I was joking. My mom's like really white. Dad like green white. Dad's like black. I like green black. That's upstate New York. So it's cool to come back down to where my dad's from. But I was really working through. I mean, everybody knows the story of sort of the Luna Downs Community and the Tears, and and I'm sure most people also know that those groups had slaves that they took with them along that pathway, I guess. Some of the tribes, the Choctaw and the Creek in particular, and Cherokee, I would say, become particularly adept at slave ownership. The Choctaw go to the degree to actually sell off possessions that they own before making the trip, to buy additional slaves to take with them on the trip. And then we have numbers of groups that acquiesce early and don't wait for sort of federal mandate. They leave of their own accord, and they move into places like Arkansas, and 20 years before the trail, you have these groups that are leaving the Southeast, moving into that area, and becoming really, really prosperous, successful cotton growers. Throughout that time period, Indian agents are petitioning the government for what they call cotton cards. I'm not sure if you're familiar with those are, but also spinning wheels, looms, and then you have this whole culture of American Indian and their black slave engineering of the devices that they need to grow cotton. So you see these sort of hybrid spinning wheels and gins that are starting to develop in that area as people become more and more successful in the cotton field. And cotton really becomes this sort of insidious, profitable motivator for expanded slavery within those territories. And when you talk about the complexity of sort of the American Indian and Black American experience in diaspora, it is caught up in the situation that took place in those regions and does to this day. It's a story of a man whose name is Kyle Tom. Kyle Tom, great granddaughter, is suing for her membership within the Creek tribe. She was getting checks and flyers and whatnot for decades, and then in 1979 it just stops. And when those tribes were able to sort of take control again of their tribal constitutions and say who is and who is not within the tribe, so many Black, Cherokee, Creeks, Choctaw got shut out of that discussion. And it's not just about the pecuniary aspect of it; it's about the real internal identity, chaos, tragedy that is created in so many people, so many families out there. And I will conclude, I will conclude with, I'm from upstate New York, and I don't know many families in upstate New York that don't say, oh, my aunt so-and-so was Cherokee, right? Or my aunt so-and-so has Shawnee. And some of it, you're sure, is probably sort of this rhetorical narrative, but then at times, you're not sure, right? Because I think there is so much overlap in the course of history, and sadly, we have to remind things like my and shit like that. All right, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.